Mahabharata Volume I Books 1 to 3 Book 1. Translator's Preface. The object of a translator should ever be to hold the mirror up to his author. That being so, his chief duty is to represent so far as practicable the manner in which his author's ideas have been expressed, retaining, if possible at the sacrifice of idiom and taste, all the peculiarities of his author's imagery and of language as well. In regard to translations from the Sanskrit, nothing is easier than to dish up Hindu ideas, so as to make them agreeable to English taste. But the endeavour of the present translator has been to give in the following pages as literal a rendering as possible of the great work of Vyasa. To the purely English reader there is much in the following pages that will strike as ridiculous. Those unacquainted with any language but their own are generally very exclusive in matters of taste. Having no knowledge of models other than what they meet within their own tongue, the standard they have formed of purity and taste in composition must necessarily be a narrow one. The translator, however, would ill discharge his duty, if for the sake of avoiding ridicule, he sacrificed fidelity to the original. He must represent his author as he is, not as he should be to please the narrow taste of those entirely unacquainted with him. Mr. Pickford, in the preface to his English translation of the Mahabharata, ably defends a close adherence to the original even at the sacrifice of idiom and taste against the claims of what has been called free translation, which means dressing the author in an outlandish garb to please those to whom he is introduced. In the preface to his classical translation of Bhartrihari's Nitai Satakam and Vairagya Satakam, Mr. C.H. Tawney says, "I am sensible that in the present attempt I have retained much local colouring. For instance, the ideas of worshipping the feet of a god of great men, though it frequently occurs in Indian literature, will undoubtedly move the laughter of Englishmen unacquainted with Sanskrit, especially if they happen to belong to that class of readers who revel their attention on the accidental and remain blind to the essential. But a certain measure of fidelity to the original, even at the risk of making oneself ridiculous, is better than the studied dishonesty which characterizes so many translations of Oriental poets." We fully subscribe to the above, although, it must be observed, the censure conveyed to the class of translators last indicated is rather undeserved, there being nothing like a studied dishonesty in their efforts which proceed only from a mistaken view of their duties and as such betray only an error of the head but not of the heart. More than 12 years ago, when Babu Pratapa Chand Roy, with Babu Dugaj and Banerjee, went to my retreat at Sipur, for engaging me to translate the Mahabharata into English, I was amazed with the grandeur of the scheme. My first question to him was whence was the money to come, supposing my competence for the task. Pratapa then unfolded to me the details of his plan, the hopes he could legitimately cherish of assistance from different quarters. He was full of enthusiasm. He showed me Dr. Roast's letter, which, he said, had suggested to him the undertaking. I had known Babu Dugajaran for many years, and I had the highest opinion of his scholarship and practical good sense. When he warmly took Pratapa's side for convincing me of the practicability of the scheme, I listened to him patiently. The two were for completing all arrangements with me the very day. To this I did not agree. I took a week's time to consider. I consulted some of my literary friends, foremost among whom was the late lamented Dr. Sampu C. Mukherjee. The latter, I found, had been waited upon by Pratapa. Dr. Mukherjee spoke to me of Pratapa as a man of indomitable energy and perseverance. The result of my conference with Dr. Mukherjee was that I wrote to Pratapa asking him to see me again. In this second interview estimates were drawn up, and everything was arranged as far as my portion of the work was concerned. My friend left with me a specimen of translation which he had received from Professor Max Muller. This I began to study, carefully comparing it sentence by sentence with the original. About its literal character there could be no doubt, but it had no flow and, therefore, could not be perused with pleasure by the general reader. The translation had been executed 30 years ago by a young German friend of the great pundit. I had to touch up every sentence. This I did without at all impairing faithfulness to the original. My first copy was set up in type and a dozen sheets were struck off. These were submitted to the judgment of a number of eminent writers, European and native. All of them, I was glad to see, approved of the specimen, and then the task of translating the Mahabharata into English seriously began. Before, however, the first fasciculus could be issued, the question as to whether the authorship of the translation should be publicly owned arose. The Pratapa Chandra Roy was against anonymity. I was for it. The reasons I adduced were chiefly founded upon the impossibility of one person translating the whole of the gigantic work. Notwithstanding my resolve to discharge to the fullest extent the duty that I took up, I might not live to carry it out. It would take many years before the end could be reached. Other circumstances than death might arise, in consequence of which my connection with the work might cease. It could not be desirable to issue successive fasciculus with the names of a succession of translators appearing on the title pages. These and other considerations convinced my friend that, after all, my view was correct. It was, accordingly, resolved to withhold the name of the translator. As a compromise, however, between the two views, it was resolved to issue the first fasciculus with two prefaces, one over the signature of the publisher and the other headed, Translator's Preface. This, it was supposed, would effectually guard against misconceptions of every kind. No careful reader would then confound the publisher with the author. Although this plan was adopted, yet before a fourth of the task had been accomplished, an influential Indian journal came down upon poor Pratapa Chandra Roy and accused him openly of being a party to a great literary imposture, viz., of posing before the world as the translator of Vyas's work when, in fact, he was only the publisher. The charge came upon my friend as a surprise, especially as he had never made a secret of the authorship in his correspondence with Oriental scholars in every part of the world. He promptly wrote to the journal in question, explaining the reasons there were for anonymity, and pointing to the two prefaces with which the first fasciculus had been given to the world. The editor readily admitted his mistake and made a satisfactory apology. Now that the translation has been completed, there can no longer be any reason for withholding the name of the translator. The entire translation is practically the work of one hand. In portions of the Adinda Sabha I was assisted by Bablacharucharan Mukherjee. About 4 forms of the Sabha were done by Professor Krishna Kamal Bhattacharya, and about half a fasciculus during my illness was done by another hand. I should however state that before passing to the printer the copy received from these gentlemen I carefully compared every sentence with the original, making such alterations as were needed for securing a uniformity of style with the rest of the work. I should here observe that in rendering the Mahabharata into English I have derived very little aid from the 3 Bengali versions that are supposed to have been executed with care. Every one of these is full of inaccuracies and blunders of every description. The Santi in particular, which is by far the most difficult of the 18 Pavas, has been made a mess of by the pundits that attacked it. Hundreds of ridiculous blunders can be pointed out in both the Rajadharma and the Mokshadharma sections. Some of these I have pointed out in footnotes. I cannot lay claim to infallibility. There are verses in the Mahabharata that are exceedingly difficult to construe. I have derived much aid from the great commentator Nilakantha. I know that Nilakantha's authority is not incapable of being challenged. But when it is remembered that the interpretations given by Nilakantha came down to him from preceptors of olden days, one should think twice before rejecting Nilakantha as a guide. About the readings I have adopted, I should say that as regards the first half of the work, I have generally adhered to the Bengal texts, as regards the latter half, to the printed Bombay edition. Sometimes individual sections, as occurring in the Bengal editions, differ widely, in respect of the order of the verses, from the corresponding ones in the Bombay edition. In such cases I have adhered to the Bengal texts, convinced that the sequence of ideas has been better preserved in the Bengal editions than the Bombay one. I should express my particular obligations to Pandit Ram Nath Dakaratna, the author of Vasudeva Vijayam and other poems, Pandit Shyamacharan Kavaratna, the learned editor of Kavya Prakasha with the commentary of Professor Mahesh Chandranatna, and Babwaghonath Banerjee, the manager of the Bharata Karyalaya. All these scholars were my referees on all points of difficulty. Pandit Ramnath's solid scholarship is known to them that have come in contact with him. I never referred to him a difficulty that he could not clear up. Unfortunately, he was not always at hand to consult. Pandit Shyamacharan Kavaratna, during my residence at Sipur, assisted me in going over the Mokshadharma sections of the Santipava. An ostentatious in the extreme, Kavaratna is truly the type of a learned Brahmin of ancient India. Babwaghonath Banerjee also has from time to time rendered me valuable assistance in clearing my difficulties. Gigantic as the work is, it would have been exceedingly difficult for me to go on with it if I had not been encouraged by Sir Stuart Bailey, Sir Auckland Colvin, Sir Alfred Croft, and among Oriental scholars, by the late lamented Dr. Reinhold Rost, and Mons. A. Bath of Paris. All these eminent men know from the beginning that the translation was proceeding from my pen. Notwithstanding the enthusiasm with which my poor friend, Pratapa Chandra Roy, always endeavoured to fill me, I am sure my energies would have flagged and patience exhausted but for the encouraging words which I always received from these patrons and friends of the enterprise. Lastly, I should name my literary chief and friend, Dr. Sampu C. Mukherjee. The kind interest he took in my labours, the repeated exhortations he addressed to me inculcating patience, the care with which he read every fasciculus as it came out, marking all those passages which threw light upon topics of antiquarian interest, and the words of praise he uttered when any expression particularly happy met his eyes, served to stimulate me more than anything else in going on with a task that sometimes seemed to me endless. Kesari Mohan Ganguly. Calcutta. The Mahabharata. Adipava. Section I. Om. Having bowed down to Narayana and Nara, the most exalted male being, and also to the goddess Saraswati, must the word Jaya be uttered. Ugrasrava, the son of Lomahashana, surnamed Soti, well versed in the Puranas, bending with humility, one day approached the great sages of rigid vows, sitting at their ease, who had attended the 12-year sacrifice of Sonaka, surnamed Kulapati, in the forest of Naimishka. Those ascetics, wishing to hear his wonderful narrations, presently began to address him who had thus arrived at that recluse abode of the inhabitants of the forest of Naimishka. Having been entertained with due respect by those holy men, he saluted those munis, sages, with joined palms, even all of them, and inquired about the progress of their asceticism. Then all the ascetics being again seated, the son of Lomahashana humbly occupied the seat that was assigned to him. Seeing that he was comfortably seated, and recovered from fatigue, one of the rishis beginning the conversation, asked him, "Whence comest thou, O lotus-eyed Soti, and where hast thou spent the time? Tell me, who asked thee, in detail?" Accomplished in speech, Soti, thus questioned, gave in the midst of that big assemblage of contemplative munis a full and proper answer in words consonant with their mode of life. Soti said, having heard the diverse sacred and wonderful stories which were composed in his Mahabharata by Krishnadvapayana, and which were recited in full by Vaisampayana at the snake sacrifice of the high-souled royal sage Janamejaya, and in the presence also of that chief of princes, the son of Parikshit, and having wandered about, visiting many sacred waters and holy shrines, I journeyed to the country venerated by the Dwijas, twice born, and called Samantapanchaka, where formerly was fought the battle between the children of Kuru and Pandu, and all the chiefs of the land ranged on either side. Thence, anxious to see you, I am come into your presence. Ye reverend sages, all of whom are to me as Brahma, ye greatly blessed who shine in this place of sacrifice with the splendor of the solar fire, ye who have concluded the silent meditations and have fed the holy fire, and yet who are sitting, without care. What, O ye Dwijas, twice born, shall I repeat? Shall I recount the sacred stories collected in the Puranas containing precepts of religious duty and of worldly profit, or the acts of illustrious saints and sovereigns of mankind? The Rishi replied, the Purana, first promulgated by the great Rishi Dvapayana, and which after having been heard both by the gods and the Brahmarshis was highly esteemed, being the most eminent narrative that exists, diversified both in diction and division, possessing subtle meanings logically combined, and gleaned from the Vedas, is a sacred work. Composed in elegant language, it includeth the subjects of other books. It is elucidated by other Shastras, and comprehendeth the sense of the four Vedas. We are desirous of hearing that history, also called Bharata, the holy composition of the wonderful Vyasa, which dispelleth the fear of evil, just as it was cheerfully recited by the Rishi Vaisampayana, under the direction of Dvapayana himself, at the snake sacrifice of Raja Janamejaya. Soti then said, having bowed down to the primordial being Isana, to whom multitudes make offerings, and who is adored by the multitude, who is the true incorruptible one, Brahma, perceptible, imperceptible, eternal, who is both a non-existing and an existing non-existing being, who is the universe and also distinct from the existing and non-existing universe, who is the creator of high and low, the ancient, exalted, inexhaustible one, who is Vishnu, beneficent and the beneficence itself, worthy of all preference, pure and immaculate, who is Hari, the ruler of the faculties, the guide of all things movable and immovable. I will declare the sacred thoughts of the illustrious sage Vyasa, of marvelous deeds and worshipped here by all. Some bards have already published this history, some are now teaching it, and others, in like manner, will hereafter promulgate it upon the earth. It is a great source of knowledge, established throughout the three regions of the world. It is possessed by the twice-born both in detailed and compendious forms. It is the delight of the learned for being embellished with elegant expressions, conversations human and divine, and a variety of poetical measures. In this world, when it was destitute of brightness and light, and enveloped all around in total darkness, there came into being, as the primal cause of creation, a mighty egg, the one inexhaustible seed of all created beings. It is called Mahadevya, and was formed at the beginning of the Yuga, in which we are told, was the true light Brahma, the eternal one, the wonderful and inconceivable being present alike in all places, the invisible and subtle cause, whose nature partaketh of entity and non-entity. From this egg came out the Lord Pitamaha Brahma, the one only Prajapati, with Zorogru and Stanu. Then appeared the 21 Prajapatis, viz., Manu, Vasishta and Paramshthi, 10 Prashitas, Daksha, and the 7 sons of Daksha. Then appeared the man of inconceivable nature, whom all the rishis know, and so the Vasudevas, the Adityas, the Vasas, and the twin Aswins, the Yakshas, the Sadhyas, the Pisachas, the Gaikas, and the Pitras. After these were produced the wise and most holy Brahmarshis, and the numerous Rajarshis distinguished by every noble quality. So the water, the heavens, the earth, the air, the sky, the points of the heavens, the years, the seasons, the months, the fortnights, called pakshas, with day and night in due succession. And thus were produced all things which are known to mankind. And what is seen in the universe, whether animate or inanimate, of created things, will at the end of the world, and after the expiration of the yuga, be again confounded. And, at the commencement of other yugas, all things will be renovated, and, like the various fruits of the earth, succeed each other in the due order of their seasons. Thus continueth perpetually to revolve in the world, without beginning and without end, this wheel which causeth the destruction of all things. The generation of Devas, in brief, was 33,333. The sons of Difwabra had Banu, Chakzas, Atmavbhavasu, Savita, Richika, Arka, Banu, Asavaha, and Ravi. Of these Vivaswans, of old, Maya was the youngest, whose son was Devavrata. The latter had for his son, Suvarata, who, we learn, had 3 sons, Komadasaj Yoti, Sataj Yoti, and Sahasraj Yoti, each of them producing numerous offspring. The illustrious Dasaj Yoti had 10,000, Sataj Yoti 10 times that number, and Sahasraj Yoti 10 times the number of Sataj Yoti's offspring. From these are descended the family of the Kuras, of the Idas, and of Bharata, the family of Yayati and of Ikshwaku, also of all the Rajarshis. Numerous also were the generations produced, and very abundant were the creatures and their places of abode. The mystery which is threefold, the Vedas, Yoga, and Vijnana Dharma, Artha, and Karma, also various books upon the subject of Dharma, Artha, and Karma, also rules from the conduct of mankind, also histories and discourses with various srutis, all of which having been seen by the Rishi Vyasa are here in due order mentioned as a specimen of the book. The Rishi Vyasa published this mass of knowledge in both a detailed and an abridged form. It is the wish of the learned in the world to possess the details and the abridgment. Some read the Brata beginning with the initial mantra, invocation, others with the story of Astika, others with a Parichara, while some Brahmanas study the whole. Men of learning display their various knowledge of the institutes in commenting on the composition. Some are skillful in explaining it, while others, in remembering its contents. The son of Satyavati having, by penance and meditation, analyzed the eternal Veda, afterwards composed this holy history, when that learned Brahmarshi of strict vows, the noble Dwapayana Vyasa, offspring of Parasara, had finished this greatest of narrations, he began to consider how he might teach it to his disciples. And the possessor of the 6 attributes, Brahma, the world's preceptor, knowing of the anxiety of the Rishi Dwapayana, came in person to the place where the latter was, for gratifying the saint, and benefiting the people. And when Vyasa, surrounded by all the tribes of Munis, saw him, he was surprised, and, standing with joined palms, he bowed and ordered a seat to be brought. And Vyasa having gone round him, who is called Hiranyagarbha, seated on that distinguished seat, stood near it, and being commanded by Brahma Paramshakti, he sat down near the seat, full of affection and smiling in joy. Then the greatly glorious Vyasa, addressing Brahma Paramshakti, said, O divine Brahma, by me a poem hath been composed which is greatly respected. The mystery of the Veda, and what other subjects have been explained by me, the various rituals of the Upanishads with the Angas, the compilation of the Puranas and history formed by me and named after the 3 divisions of time, past, present, and future, the determination of the nature of decay, fear, disease, existence, and non-existence, a description of creeds and of the various modes of life, rule for the 4 castes, and the import of all the Puranas, an account of asceticism and of the duties of a religious student, the dimensions of the sun and moon, the planets, constellations, and stars, together with the duration of the 4 ages, the Rig, Sama and Yajur Vedas, also the Adhyatma, the sciences called Nyaya, or therapy and treatment of diseases, charity and Pasupatadharma, birth celestial and human, for particular purposes, also a description of places of pilgrimage and other holy places, of rivers, mountains, forests, the ocean, of heavenly cities and the kalpas, the art of war, the different kinds of nations and languages, the nature of the manners of the people, and the all-pervading spirit. All these have been represented. But, after all, no writer of this work is to be found on earth. Brahma said, I esteem thee for thy knowledge of divine mysteries, before the whole body of celebrated Munis distinguished for the sanctity of their lives. I know thou hast revealed the divine word, even from its first utterance, in the language of truth. Thou hast called thy present work a poem, wherefore it shall be a poem. There shall be no poets whose works may equal the descriptions of this poem, even as the 3 other modes called Israma are ever unequal in merit to the domestic Israma. Let Ganesa be thought of, O moon, for the purpose of writing the poem. Soti said, Brahma having thus spoken to Vyasa, retired to his own abode. Then Vyasa began to call to mind Ganesa. And Ganesa, obviator of obstacles, ready to fulfill the desires of his votaries, was no sooner thought of than he repaired to the place where Vyasa was seated. And when he had been saluted, and was seated, Vyasa addressed him thus, O guide of the Ganas, be thou the writer of the Bharata which I have formed in my imagination, and which I am about to repeat. Ganesa, upon hearing this address, thus answered, I will become the writer of thy work, provided my pen do not for a moment cease writing. And Vyasa said unto that divinity, wherever there be anything thou dost not comprehend, cease to continue writing. Ganesa, having signified his assent, by repeating the word Om, proceeded to write, and Vyasa began, and by way of a diversion, he knit the knots of composition exceeding close, by doing which, he dictated this work according to his engagement. I am, continued Soti, acquainted with 8,800 verses, and so is Sukha, and perhaps Sanjaya. From the mysteriousness of their meaning, O moon, no one is able, to this day, to penetrate those closely knit difficult slokas. Even the omniscient Ganesa took a moment to consider, while Vyasa, however, continued to compose other verses in great abundance. The wisdom of this work, like unto an instrument of applying collyrium, hath opened the eyes of the inquisitive world blinded by the darkness of ignorance. As the sun dispelleth the darkness, so doth the Bharata by its discourses on religion, profit, pleasure and final release, dispel the ignorance of men. As the full moon by its mild light expandeth the buds of the water lily, so this Purana, by exposing the light of the Suruti, hath expanded the human intellect. By the lamp of history, which destroyeth the darkness of ignorance, the whole mansion of nature is properly and completely illuminated. This work is a tree, of which the chapter of contents is the seed. The divisions, called Poloma and Astika, are the root. The part called Sambhava is the trunk. The books called Sabha and Aranya are the roosting perches. The books called Tirani is the knitting knots. The books called Virata and Udyoga the pith. The book named Bhishma, the main branch. The book called Drona, the leaves. The book called Karna, the fair flowers. The book named Salya, the sweet smell. The books entitled Sri and Ishika, the refreshing shade. The book called Santi, the mighty fruit. The book called Aswamda, the immortal sap. The denominated as Mavasika, the spot where it groweth. And the book called Mosala is an epitome of the Vedas and held in great respect by the virtuous Brahmanas. The tree of the Bharata, inexhaustible to mankind as the clouds, shall be as a source of livelihood to all distinguished poets. Soti continued, I will now speak of the undying flowery and fruitful productions of this tree, possessed of pure and pleasant taste, and not to be destroyed even by the immortals. Formerly, the spirited and virtuous Krishnadwapayana, by the injunctions of Bhishma, the wise son of Ganga and of his own mother, became the father of 3 boys who were like the 3 fires by the 2 wives of Vichitravirya, and having thus raised up Dhritarashtra, Bandu and Vidura, he returned to his recluse abode to prosecute his religious exercise. It was not till after these were born, grown up, and departed on the supreme journey, that the great Rishi Vyasa published the Bharata in this region of mankind, when being solicited by Janamejaya and thousands of Brahmanas, he instructed his disciple Vaisampayana, who was seated near him, and he, sitting together with the Sardasyas, recited the Bharata during the intervals of the ceremonies of the sacrifice, being repeatedly urged to proceed. Vyasa hath fully represented the greatness of the house of Kuru, the virtuous principles of Gandhari, the wisdom of Vidura, and the constancy of Kunti. The noble Rishi hath also described the divinity of Vasudeva, the rectitude of the sons of Pandu, and the evil practices of the sons and partisans of Dhritarashtra. Vyasa executed the compilation of the Bharata, exclusive of the episodes originally, in 24,000 verses, and so much only is called by the learned as the Bharata. Afterwards, he composed an epitome in 150 verses, consisting of the introduction with the chapter of contents. This he first taught to his son Sukha, and afterwards he gave it to others of his disciples who were possessed of the same qualifications. After that he executed another compilation, consisting of 600,000 verses. Of those, 300,000 are known in the world of the Devas, 1,500,000 in the world of the Baitras, 1,400,000 among the Gandharvas, and 100,000 in the regions of mankind. Narada recited them to the Devas, Devala to the Baitras, and Sukha published them to the Gandharvas, Yakshas, and Rakshasas, and in this world they were recited by Vaisampayana, one of the disciples of Vyasa, a man of just principles and the first among all those acquainted with the Vedas. Know that I, Soti, have also repeated 100,000 verses. Yudhishthira is a vast tree, formed of religion and virtue. Arjuna is its trunk, Bhimasena, its branches. The 2 sons of Madri are its full-grown fruit and flowers, and its roots are Krishna, Brahma, and the Brahmanas. Pandu, after having subdued many countries by his wisdom and prowess, shook up his abode with the Munis in a certain forest as a sportsman, where he brought upon himself a very severe misfortune for having killed a stag coupling with its mate, which served as a warning from the conduct of the princes of his house as long as they lived. Their mothers, in order that the ordinances of the law might be fulfilled, admitted as substitutes to their embraces the gods Dharma, Vayu, Sakra, and the divinities the twin Aswins. And when their offspring grew up, under the care of their 2 mothers, in the society of ascetics, in the midst of sacred groves and holy recluse abodes of religious men, they were conducted by rishis into the presence of Dhritarashtra and his sons, following as students in the habit of brahmacharis, having their hair tied in knots on their heads. These are pupils, said they, are as your sons, your brothers, and your friends, they are Pandavas. Saying this, the Munis disappeared. When the Kauravas saw them introduced as the sons of Pandu, the distinguished class of citizens shouted exceedingly for joy. Some, however, said they were not the sons of Pandu, others said they were, while a few asked how they could be his offspring, seeing he had been so long dead. Still on all sides voices were heard crying, they are on all accounts welcome. Through divine providence we behold the family of Pandu. Let their welcome be proclaimed. As these acclamations ceased, the plaudits of invisible spirits, causing every point of the heavens to resound, were tremendous. There were showers of sweet-scented flowers, and the sound of shells and kettle drums. Such were the wonders that happened on the arrival of the young princes. The joyful noise of all the citizens, in expression of their satisfaction on the occasion, was so great that it reached the very heavens in magnifying plaudits. Having studied the whole of the Vedas and sundry other Shastras, the Pandavas resided there, respected by all and without apprehension from anyone. The principal men were pleased with the purity of Yudhishthira, the courage of Arjuna, the submissive attention of Kunti to her superiors, and the humility of the twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, and all the people rejoiced in their heroic virtues. After a while, Arjuna obtained the virgin Krishna at the Swayamvara, in the midst of a concourse of Rajas, by performing a very difficult feat of archery, and from this time he became very much respected in this world among all bowmen, and in fields of battle also. Like the sun, he was hard to behold by foemen. And having vanquished all the neighbouring princes and every considerable tribe, he accomplished all that was necessary for the Raja, his eldest brother, to perform the great sacrifice called Rajasuya. Yudhishthira, after having, through the wise counsels of Vasudeva and by the valour of Bhimasena and Arjuna, slain Jarasandha, the king of Magadha, and the proud Cheju, acquired the right to perform the grand sacrifice of Rajasuya, abounding in provisions and offering and fraught with transcendent merits. And Duryodhana came to this sacrifice, and when he beheld the vast wealth of the Pandavas scattered all around, the offerings, the precious stones, gold and jewels, the wealth in cows, elephants, and horses, the curious textures, garments, and mantles, the precious shawls and furs and carpets made of the skin of the ranku, he was filled with envy and became exceedingly displeased. And when he beheld the hall of assembly elegantly constructed by Maya, the Asura architect, after the fashion of a celestial court, he was inflamed with rage. And having started in confusion at certain architectural deceptions within this building, he was derided by Bhimasena in the presence of Vasudeva, like one of mean descent. And it was represented to Dhritarashtra that his son, while partaking of various objects of enjoyment and diverse precious things, was becoming meagre, wan, and pale. And Dhritarashtra, some time after, out of affection for his son, gave his consent to their playing, with the Pandavas, at dice. And Vasudeva, coming to know of this, became exceedingly wroth. And being dissatisfied, he did nothing to prevent the disputes, but overlooked the gaming and sundry other horrid and justifiable transactions arising therefrom, and in spite of Vidura, Bhishma, Drona, and Kripa, the son of Saradwan, he made the Kshatriyas kill each other in the terrific war that ensued. And Dhritarashtra, hearing the ill news of the success of the Pandavas and recollecting the resolutions of Duryodhana, Kama, and Sakuni, pondered for a while and addressed to Sanjaya the following speech. Attend, O Sanjaya, to all I am about to say, and it will not become thee to treat me with contempt. Thou art well versed in the Shastras, intelligent and endowed with wisdom. My inclination was never to war, not did I delight in the destruction of my race. I made no distinction between my own children and the children of Pandu. My own sons were prone to wilfulness and despised me because I am old. Blind as I am, because of my miserable plight, and through paternal affection, I bore it all. I was foolish altered the thoughtless Duryodhana, ever growing in folly. Having been a spectator of the riches of the mighty sons of Pandu, my son was derided for his awkwardness while ascending the hall. Unable to bear it all and unable himself to overcome the sons of Pandu in the field, and though a soldier, unwilling yet to obtain good fortune by his own exertion, with the help of the king of Gandhara he concerted an unfair game at dice. Hear, O Sanjaya, all that happened thereupon and came to my knowledge. And when thou hast heard all I say, recollecting everything as it fell out, thou shalt then know me for one with a prophetic eye. When I heard that Arjuna, having bent the bow, had pierced the curious mark and brought it down to the ground, and bore away in triumph the maiden Krishna, in the sight of the assembled princes, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Subhadra of the race of Mad, who had, after forcible seizure, been married by Arjuna in the city of Dwaraka, and that the two heroes of the race of Vrishani, Krishna and Balarama, the brothers of Subhadra, without resenting it, had entered Indraprastha as friends, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna, by his celestial arrow preventing the downpour by Indra the king of the gods, had gratified Agni by making over to him the forest of Kandava, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the 5 Pandavas with their mother Kunti had escaped from the house of Lak, and that Vijura was engaged in the accomplishment of their designs, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna, after having pierced the mark in the arena, had won Draupadi, and that the brave Panchalas had joined the Pandavas, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Jarasandha, the foremost of the royal line of Magadha, and blazing in the midst of the Kshatriyas, had been slain by Bhima with his bare arms alone, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that in their general campaign the sons of Bandhu had conquered the chiefs of the land and performed the grand sacrifice of the Rajasuya, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Draupadi, her voice choked with tears and heart full of agony, in the season of impurity and with but one raiment on, had been dragged into court, and though she had protectors, she had been treated as if she had none, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the wicked wretch Dusasana was striving to strip her of that single garment, had only drawn from her person a large heap of cloth without being able to arrive at its end, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Yudhishthira, beaten by Saubala at the game of dice and deprived of his kingdom as a consequence thereof, had still been attended upon by his brothers of incomparable prowess, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the virtuous Pandavas, weeping with affliction, had followed their elder brother to the wilderness and exerted themselves variously for the mitigation of his discomforts, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Yudhishthira had been followed into the wilderness by Snatakas and noble-minded Brahmanas who live upon alms, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna, having, in combat, pleased the god of gods, Triambaka, the three-eyed, in the disguise of a hunter, obtained the great weapon Pasupata, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the just and renowned Arjuna, after having been to the celestial regions, had there obtained celestial weapons from Indra himself, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that afterwards Arjuna had vanquished the Kalakas and their Polamas proud with a boon they had obtained and which had rendered them invulnerable even to the celestials, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna, the chastiser of enemies, having gone to the regions of Indra for the destruction of the Asuras, had returned thence successful, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Bhima and the other sons of Pritha, Kunti, accompanied by Vaisravana, had arrived at that country which is inaccessible to man, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that my sons, guided by the counsels of Karna, while on their journey of Kushaitra, had been taken prisoners by the Gandharvas and were set free by Arjuna, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Dharma, the god of justice, having come under the form of a yaksha, had proposed certain questions to Yudhishthira, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that my sons had failed to discover the Pandavas under their disguise while residing with Draupadi in the dominions of Virata, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the principal men of my side had all been vanquished by the noble Arjuna with a single chariot while residing in the dominions of Virata, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Vasudeva of the race of Manu, who covered this whole earth by 1 foot, was heartily interested in the welfare of the Pandavas, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the king of Matsya had offered his virtuous daughter Udara to Arjuna and that Arjuna had accepted her for his son, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Yudhishthira, beaten at dice, deprived of wealth, exiled and separated from his connections, had assembled yet an army of 7 Akshayinis, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard Narada declare that Krishna and Arjuna were Nara and Narayana and he, Narada, had seen them together in the regions of Brahma, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Krishna, anxious to bring about peace for the welfare of mankind, had repaired to the Kuras, and went away without having been able to effect his purpose, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Kama and Duryodhana resolved upon imprisoning Krishna displayed in himself the whole universe, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. Then I heard that at the time of his departure, Pritha, Kunti, standing, full of sorrow, near his chariot received consolation from Krishna. Then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Vasudeva and Bhishma the son of Santanu were the counsellors of the Pandavas and Drona the son of Bharadwaj pronounced blessings on them, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When Kama said unto Bhishma, I will not fight when thou art fighting, and, quitting the army, went away, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Vasudeva and Arjuna and the bow Gandharva of immeasurable prowess, these 3 of dreadful energy had come together, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that upon Arjuna having been seized with compunction on his chariot and ready to sink, Krishna showed him all the worlds within his body, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Bhishma, the desolator of foes, killing 10,000 charioteers every day in the field of battle, had not slain any amongst the Pandavas, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Bhishma, the righteous son of Ganga, had himself indicated the means of his defeat in the field of battle and that the same were accomplished by the Pandavas with joyfulness, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna, having placed Sikandin before himself in his chariot, had wounded Bhishma of infinite courage and invincible in battle, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the aged hero Bhishma, having reduced the numbers of the race of Shamaka to a few, overcome with various wounds, was lying on a bed of arrows, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that upon Bhishma's lying on the ground with thirst for water, Arjuna, being requested, had pierced the ground and allayed his thirst, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When Bayu together with Indra and Surya united as allies for the success of the sons of Kunti and the beasts of prey, by their inauspicious presence, were putting us in fear, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When the wonderful warrior Drona, displaying various modes of fight in the field, did not slay any of the superior Pandavas, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the Maharatha and Saptakas of our army appointed for the overthrow of Arjuna were all slain by Arjuna himself, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that our disposition of forces, impenetrable by others, and defended by Bharadwaja himself well armed, had been singly forced and entered by the brave son of Subhadra, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that our Maharathas, unable to overcome Arjuna, with jubilant faces after having jointly surrounded and slain the boy Abhimanyu, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the blind Kauravas were shouting for joy after having slain Abhimanyu, and that thereupon Arjuna in anger made his celebrated speech referring to Saindava, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna had vowed the death of Saindava and fulfilled his vow in the presence of his enemies, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that upon the horses of Arjuna being fatigued, Vasudeva releasing them made them drink water and bringing them back and reharnessing them continued to guide them as before, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that while his horses were fatigued, Arjuna staying in his chariot checked all his assailants, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Ayudhana of the race of Vrishani, after having thrown into confusion the army of Drona rendered unbearable in prowess owing to the presence of elephants, retired to where Krishna and Arjuna were, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Karna, even though he had got Bhima within his power, allowed him to escape after only addressing him in contemptuous terms and dragging him with the end of his bow, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Drona, Kritavarma, Kripa, Karna, the son of Drona, and the valiant king of Madra, Salya, suffered Saindava to be slain, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the celestial Sakti given by Indra, to Karna, was by Madhava's machinations caused to be hurled upon Rakshasa Ghatotkacha of frightful countenance, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that in the encounter between Karna and Ghatotkacha, that Sakti was hurled against Ghatotkacha by Karna, the same which was certainly to have slain Arjuna in battle, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Dristadama, transgressing the laws of battle, slew Drona while alone in his chariot and resolved on death, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Nakula, the son of Madri, having in the presence of the whole army engaged in single combat with the son of Drona and showing himself equal to him, drove his chariot in circles round, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When upon the death of Drona, his son misused the weapon called Narayana but failed to achieve the destruction of the Pandavas, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Bhimasena drank the blood of his brother Dusasana in the field of battle without anybody being able to prevent him, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the infinitely brave Karna, invincible in battle, was slain by Arjuna in that war of brothers mysterious even to the gods, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Yudhishthira, the just, overcame the heroic son of Drona, Dusasana, and the fierce Kritavarman, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the brave king of Madra, whoever dared Krishna in battle, was slain by Yudhishthira, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the wicked Shavala of magic power, the root of the gaming and the feud, was slain in battle by Sahadeva, the son of Pandu, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Duryodhana, spent with fatigue, having gone to a lake and made a refuge for himself within its waters, was lying there alone, his strength gone and without a chariot, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the Pandavas, having gone to that lake accompanied by Vasudeva and standing on its beach, began to address contemptuously my son who was incapable of putting up with the fronts, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that while displaying in circles a variety of curious modes of attack and defense, in an encounter with clubs, he was unfairly slain according to the counsels of Krishna, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard the son of Drona and others by slaying the Panchalas and the sons of Draupadi in their sleep, perpetrated a horrible and infamous deed, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that Aswatthama, while being pursued by Bhimasena, had discharged the first of weapons called Ishika, by which the embryo in the womb of Uttara was wounded, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that the weapon Brahmashira, discharged by Aswatthama, was repelled by Arjuna with another weapon over which he had pronounced the word Sasti, and that Aswatthama had to give up the jewel-like excrescence on his head, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. When I heard that upon the embryo in the womb of Virata's daughter being wounded by Aswatthama with a mighty weapon, Dwaipayana and Krishna pronounced curses on him, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. Alas! Gandhari, destitute of children, grandchildren, parents, brothers, and kindred, is to be pitied. Difficult is the task that hath been performed by the Pandavas, by them hath the kingdom been recovered without a rival. Alas! I have heard that the war hath left only 10 alive, 3 of our side, and the Pandavas, 7. In that dreadful conflict 18 Ukshayinis of Kshatriyas have been slain. All around me is utter darkness, and a fit of swoon saileth me, consciousness leaves me, O Suta, and my mind is distracted. Soti said, Dhritarashtra, bewailing his fate in these words, was overcome with extreme anguish and for a time deprived of sense, but being revived, he addressed Sanjaya in the following words. After what hath come to pass, O Sanjaya, I wish to put an end to my life without delay. I do not find the least advantage in cherishing it any longer. Soti said, the wise son of Gavalgana, Sanjaya, then addressed the distressed lord of earth while thus talking and bewailing, sighing like a serpent and repeatedly tainting, in words of deep import. Thou hast heard, O Raja, of the greatly powerful men of vast exertions, spoken of by Vyasa and the wise Narada, men born of great royal families, resplendent with worthy qualities, versed in the science of celestial arms, and in glory emblems of Indra, men who having conquered the world by justice and performed sacrifices with fit offerings to the Brahmanas, obtained renown in this world and at last succumbed to the sway of time. Such was Saviour, the valiant Mahabharata, Srinjaya, great amongst conquerors, Sahadra, Rantideva, and Kakshivanta, great in glory, Valika, Damana, Saryati, Ajita, and Nala, Viswamitra the destroyer of foes, Amvarisha, great in strength, Maruta, Manu, Ikshaku, Gaya, and Bharata, Rama the son of Dasaratha, Sasavindu, Ambaghrita, Kritavarya, the greatly fortunate, and Janamjaya and Yayati of good deeds who performed sacrifices, being assisted therein by the celestials themselves, and by whose sacrificial altars and stakes this earth with her habited and uninhabited regions hath been marked all over. These 24 Rajas were formerly spoken of by the celestial Rishi Narada unto Saviour when much afflicted for the loss of his children. Besides these, other Rajas had gone before, still more powerful than they, mighty charioteers noble in mind, and resplendent with every worthy quality. These were Puru, Kuru, Yadu, Zura and Viswasrawa of great glory, Anuga, Yuvana, Swu, Kukuska, Vikrami, and Raghu, Vaishava, Virota, Anga, Bhava, Sweta, and Vrupadgaru, Uznara, Sataratha, Kanka, Juladuka, and Ruma, Damhodbhava, Para, Vena, Sagara, Sankriti, and Nimai, Ajaya, Parasu, Pandra, Sambhu, and Holy Devavra, Devahuya, Supratika, and Frihadratha, Mahatsaha, Vinadatma, Sukratu, and Nala, the king of the Nishadas, Satyavrata, Santabaya, Sumatra, and the chief Sabala, Janujanga, Anaranya, Arka, Priyaprajya, Jachivrata, Balabandhu, Nirmada, Ketusringa, and Brahidbala, Drishtaketu, Brihatkatu, Driptaketu, and Niramaya, Abhikshat, Chapala, Tirta, Kritbanhu, and Drishadi, Mahapran Sambhavya, Pratyanga, Paraha and Sruti. These, O chief, and other Rajas, we hear enumerated by hundreds and by thousands, and still others by millions, princes of great power and wisdom, quitting very abundant enjoyments met death as thy sons have done, their heavenly deeds, valor, and generosity, their magnanimity, faith, truth, purity, simplicity and mercy, are published to the world in the records of former times by sacred bards of great learning. Though endued with every noble virtue, these have yielded up their lives. Thy sons were malevolent, inflamed with passion, avaricious, and of very evil disposition. Thou art versed in the Sastras, O Bharata, and art intelligent and wise. They never sink under misfortunes, whose understandings are guided by the Sastras. Thou art acquainted, O Prince, with the lenity and severity of fate. This anxiety therefore for the safety of thy children is unbecoming. Moreover, it behoveth thee not to grieve for that which must happen, for who can avert, by his wisdom, the decrees of fate? No one can leave the way marked out for him by Providence. Existence and non-existence, pleasure and pain all have time for their root. Time createth all things and time destroyeth all creatures. It is time that burneth creatures and it is time that extinguisheth the fire. All states, the good and the evil, in the three worlds, are caused by time. Time cutteth short all things and createth them anew. Time alone is awake when all things are asleep. Indeed, time is incapable of being overcome. Time passeth over all things without being retarded. Knowing, as thou dost, that all things past and future and all that exist at the present moment are the offspring of time, it behoveth thee not to throw away thy reason. Soti said, the son of Gavalgana, having in this manner administered comfort to the royal Dhritarashtra overwhelmed with grief for his sons, then restored his mind to peace. Taking these facts for his subject, Vaipayana composed a holy Upanishad that has been published to the world by learned and sacred bards in the Puranas composed by them. The study of the Bharata is an act of piety. He that readeth even 1 foot, with belief, hath his sins entirely purged away. Here endeavours, Devashis, and immaculate Brahmashis of good deeds, have been spoken of, and likewise Yakshas and great Uragas, Nagas. Herein also hath been described the eternal Vasudeva possessing the 6 attributes. He is the true and just, the pure and holy, the eternal Brahma, the supreme soul, the true constant light, whose divine deeds wise and learned recount, from whom hath proceeded the non-existent and existent non-existent universe with principles of generation and progression, and birth, death and rebirth. That also hath been treated of which is called a Dhyatma, the superintending spirit of nature, that partaketh of the attributes of the 5 elements. That also hath been described who is Purusha being above such epithets as undisplayed and the like, also that which the foremost yet is exempt from the common destiny, and endues with the power of meditation and tapas behold dwelling in their hearts as a reflected image in the mirror. The man of faith, devoted to piety, and constant in the exercise of virtue, on reading this section is freed from sin. The believer that constantly heareth recited this section of the Bharata, called the introduction, from the beginning, falleth not into difficulties. The man repeating any part of the introduction in the 2 twilights is during such act freed from the sins contracted during the day or the night. This section, the body of the Bharata, is truth and nectar. As butter is incurred, Brahmana among bipeds, the Aranyaka among the Vedas, and nectar among medicines, as the sea is eminent among receptacles of water, and the cow among quadrupeds, as are these, among the things mentioned, so is the Bharata said to be among histories. He that causeth it, even a single foot thereof, to be recited to Brahmanas during a Sraddha, his offerings of the food and drink to the manes of his ancestors become inexhaustible. By the aid of history and the Puranas, the Veda may be expounded, but the Veda is afraid of one of little information lest he should it. The learned man who recites to other this Veda of Vyas reapeth advantage. It may without doubt destroy even the sin of killing the embryo and the like. He that readeth this holy chapter of the moon, readeth the whole of the Bharata, I ween. The man who with reverence daily listeneth to this sacred work acquireth long life and renown, and ascendeth to heaven. In former days, having placed the 4 Vedas on one side and the Bharata on the other, these were weighed in the balance by the celestials assembled for that purpose. And as the latter weighed heavier than the 4 Vedas with their mysteries, from that period it hath been called in the world Mahabharata, the great Bharata. Being esteemed superior both in substance and gravity of import, it is denominated Mahabharata on account of such substance and gravity of import. He that knoweth its meaning is saved from all his sins. Taper is innocent, study is harmless, the ordinance of the Vedas prescribed for all the tribes are harmless. The acquisition of wealth by exertion is harmless, but when they are abused in their practices it is then that they become sources of evil. Section 2. The Rishis said, O son of Sutta, we wish to hear a full and circumstantial account of the place mentioned by you as Samantapanjaya. Soti said, Listen, O ye Brahmanas, to the sacred descriptions I utter, O ye best of men. Ye deserve to hear of the place known as Samantapanchaka. In the interval between the Treta and Dwapara Yugas, Rama, the son of Jamadani, great among all who have borne arms, urged by impatience of wrongs, repeatedly smote the noble race of Kshatriyas. And when that fiery meteor, by his own valor, annihilated the entire tribe of the Kshatriyas, he formed at Samantapanchaka 5 lakes of blood. We are told that his reason being overpowered by anger, he offered oblations of blood to the manes of his ancestors, standing in the midst of the sanguine waters of those lakes. It was then that his forefathers, of whom Richika was the first, having arrived there, addressed him thus, O Rama, O blessed Rama, O offspring of Bhrigu, we have been gratified with the reverence thou hast shown for thy ancestors and with thy valor, O mighty one. Blessings be upon thee. O thou illustrious one, ask the boon that thou mayst desire. Rama said, If, O fathers, ye are favourably disposed towards me, the boon I ask is that I may be absolved from the sins born of my having annihilated the Kshatriyas in anger, and that the lakes I have formed may become famous in the world as holy shrines. The Baitrus then said, So shall it be. But be thou pacified. And Rama was pacified accordingly. The region that layeth near unto those lakes of gory water, from that time hath been celebrated as Samantapanchaka the Holy. The wise have declared that every country should be distinguished by a name significant of some circumstance which may have rendered it famous. In the interval between the Dwapara and the Kali Yugas there happened at Samantapanchaka the encounter between the armies of the Kauravas and the Pandavas. In that holy region, without ruggedness of any kind, were assembled 18 Ukshayinis of soldiers eager for battle. And, O Brahmanas, having come thereto, they were all slain on the spot. Thus the name of that region, O Brahmanas, hath been explained, and the country described to you as a sacred and delightful one. I have mentioned the whole of what relateth to it, as the region is celebrated throughout the 3 worlds. The rishis said, We have a desire to know, O son of Suta, what is implied by the term Akshayini that hath been used by thee. Tell us in full what is the number of horse and foot, chariots and elephants, which compose an Akshayini, for thou art fully informed. Soti said, 1 chariot, 1 elephant, 5 foot soldiers, and 3 horses form 1 patti. 3 pattas make 1 snamaka. 3 snamakas are called a gulma. 3 gulmas, a gana. 3 ganas, a vahini. 3 vahinis together are called a pratana. 3 pratanas form a chamu. 3 chamas, 1 anaikini, and an anaikini taken 10 times forms, as it is styled by those who know, an akshayini. O ye best of Brahmanas, arithmeticians have calculated that the number of chariots in an akshayini is 21,870. The measure of elephants must be fixed at the same number. O ye pure, you must know that the number of foot soldiers is 109,350. The number of horse is 65,610. These, O Brahmanas, as fully explained by me, are the numbers of an akshayini as said by those acquainted with the principles of numbers. O best of Brahmanas, according to this calculation were composed the 18 Ukshayinis of the Kaurava and the Pandava army. Time, whose acts are wonderful, assembled them on that spot, and having made the Kauravas the cause, destroyed them all. Bhishma, acquainted with choice of weapons, fought for 10 days. Drona protected the Kaurava Vahinis for 5 days. Kama, the desolator of hostile armies, fought for 2 days, and Salya for half a day. After that lasted for half a day the encounter with clubs between Duryodhana and Bhima. At the close of that day, as Haman and Kripa destroyed the army of Yudhishthira in the night while sleeping without suspicion of danger. O Sonaka, this best of narrations called Bharata, which has begun to be repeated at thy sacrifice, was formerly repeated at the sacrifice of Janamejaya by an intelligent disciple of Vyasa. It is divided into several sections. In the beginning are Portia, Paul Oma, and Istika Pavas, describing in full the valour and renown of kings. It is a work whose description, diction, and sense are varied and wonderful. It contains an account of various manners and rites. It is accepted by the wise, as the state called Vairagya is by men desirous of final release, as self among things to be known, as life among things that are dear, so is this history that furnisheth a means of arriving at the knowledge of Brahma the first among all the sastras. There is not a story current in this world but doth depend upon this history, even as the body upon the foot that it taketh. As masters of good lineage are ever attended upon by servants desirous of preferment, so is the Bharata cherished by all poets. As the words constituting the several branches of knowledge appertaining to the world and the Veda display only vowels and consonants, so this excellent history displayeth only the highest wisdom. Listen, O ye ascetics, to the outlines of the several divisions, pavas, of this history called Bharata, endued with great wisdom, of sections and feet that are wonderful and various, of subtle meanings and logical connections, and embellished with the substance of the Vedas. The first pava is called Danukramanika, the second, Sangraha, then Portia, then Paul Oma, the Istika, then Adivansavartarana. Then comes the Sambhava of wonderful and thrilling incidents. Then comes Jatugrahadaha, setting fire to the house of Lak, and then Hidimabada, the killing of Hidimba, Pavas. Then comes Barkabada, slaughter of Barka, and then Chitraratha. The next is called Swayamvara, selection of husband by Panchali, in which Arjuna by the exercise of Kshatriya virtues, won Draupadi for wife. Then comes Vaivahaka, marriage. Then comes Viduragamana, advent of Vidura, Rajyalabha, acquirement of kingdom, Arjuna Banavasa, exile of Arjuna, and Subhadraharana, the carrying away of Subhadra. After these come Haranaharika, Kandavadaha, the burning of the Kandava forest, and Maya Dasana, meeting with Maya the Ajura architect. Then comes Sabha, Mantra, Jarasandha, Digvijaya, general campaign. After Digvijaya come Rajasuyaka, Argaya Viharana, the robbing of the Argaya, and Sisupalabhada, the killing of Sisupala. After these, Dyuta, gambling, Ainadiyuta, subsequent to gambling, Aranyaka, and Kramirabhada, destruction of the Kramira. The Arjuna Vigamana, the travels of Arjuna, Care Irati. In the last hath been described the battle between Arjuna and Mahadeva in the guise of a hunter. After this Indraloka Vigamana, the journey to the regions of Indra, then that mine of religion and virtue, the highly pathetic Nalopakayana, the story of Nala. After this last, Tirthayatra or the pilgrimage of the wise prince of the Kuras, the death of Jitajura, and the battle of the Yakshas. Then the battle with the Nivatakavashas, Ajagara, and Markandeya Samasya, meeting with Markandeya. Then the meeting of Draupadi and Satyabhama, Goshaidra, Murgaswapna, dream of the deer. Then the story of Brihadaranyaka and then Indradrama. Then Draupadi Harana, the abduction of Draupadi, Jayadratha by Muksna, the release of Jayadratha. Then the story of Savitri illustrating the great merit of connubial chastity. After this last, the story of Rama. The Pava that comes next is called Kundalaharana, the theft of the earrings. That which comes next is Aranya and then Vairata. Then the entry of the Pandavas and the fulfillment of their promise of living unknown for 1 year. Then the destruction of the Kikakas. Then the attempt to take the kine of Vairatu by the Kauravas. The next is called the marriage of Abhimanyu with the daughter of Vairata. The next you must know is the most wonderful Pava called Udyoga. The next must be known by the name of Sanjayayana, the arrival of Sanjaya. Then comes Prajagara, the sleeplessness of Dhritarashtra owing to his anxiety. Then Sanat Sujata, in which are the mysteries of spiritual philosophy. Then Yanasadi, and then the arrival of Krishna. Then the story of Matali and then of Galava. Then the stories of Savitri, Vamadeva, and Vanya. Then the story of Jamadanya and Shadasarajika. Then the arrival of Krishna at the court, and then Baidulaputarasasana. Then the muster of troops and the story of Sheta. Then, must you know, comes the quarrel of the Haisaldkana. Then the march to the field of the troops of both sides. The next hath been called numbering the Ratas and Atiratas. Then comes the arrival of the messenger Aluka which kindled the wrath of the Pandavas. The next that comes, you must know, is the story of Amba. Then comes the thrilling story of the installation of Bhishma as commander-in-chief. The next is called the creation of the insular region Jambu, then Bhumi, then the account about the formation of islands. Then comes the Bhagavad Gita, and then the death of Bhishma. Then the installation of Drona, then the destruction of the Sansaptakas. Then the death of Abhimanyu, and then the vow of Arjuna to slay Jayadratha. Then the death of Jayadratha, and then of Gatotkacha. Then, must you know, comes the story of the death of Drona of surprising interest. The next that comes is called the discharge of the weapon called Narayana. Then, you know, is Karna, and then Salya. Then comes the immersion in the lake, and then the encounter between Bhima and Duryodhana with clubs. Then comes Saraswati, and then the descriptions of holy shrines, and then genealogies. Then comes Sauptika describing incidents disgraceful to the honor of the Kurus. Then comes the Ayaka of harrowing incidents. Then comes Jalapradana, oblations of water to the manes of the deceased, and then the wailings of the women. The next must be known as Sarada, describing the funeral rites performed for the slain Kauravas. Then comes the destruction of the Rakshasa Charvaka, who had assumed the disguise of a Brahmana for deceiving Yudhishthira. Then the coronation of the wise Yudhishthira. The next is called the Grihapravibhaga. Then comes Anti, then Rajadharmanus Asana, then Apadharma, then Mokshadharma. Those that follow are called respectively Sukhaprasna Abhigamana, Brahmaprasna Nusana, the origin of Davasa, the disputations with Maya. The next is to be known as Anus Arsanika. Then the ascension of Bhishma to heaven. Then the horse sacrifice, which when read purgeth all sins away. The next must be known as the Anujita, in which are words of spiritual philosophy. Those that follow are called as from Vasa, Patradarshana, meeting with the spirits of the deceased sons, and the arrival of Narada. The next is called Morsala, which abounds with terrible and cruel incidents. Then comes Mahaprasthanika and ascension to heaven. Then comes the Purana, which is called Kilvansa. In this last are contained Vaishnupava, Vishnu's frolics and feats as a child, the destruction of Kansa, and lastly, the very wonderful Bhavishayapava, in which there are prophecies regarding the future. The High Sudvyasa composed these 100 pavas, of which the above is only an abridgment, having distributed them into 18. The son of Sutta recited them consecutively in the forest of Naimishka as follows. In the Adi Pava are contained Porshaya, Paul Oma, Astika, Adivansavadara, Samva, the burning of the house of Lak, the slaying of Hidimba, the destruction of the Ajuravaka, Chitraratha, the Swayamvara of Draupadi, the marriage after the overthrow of rivals in war, the arrival of Vidura, the restoration, Arjuna's exile, the abduction of Subhadra, the gift and receipt of the marriage dower, the burning of the Kandava forest, and the meeting with the Asura architect, Maya. The Porshaya Pava treats of the greatness of Utanka, and the Pauloma, of the sons of Bhrigu. The Astika describes the birth of Garuda and of the Nagas, snakes, the churning of the ocean, the incidents relating to the birth of the celestial steed Duvakasrava, and finally, the dynasty of Bharata, as described in the snake sacrifice of King Janamejaya. The Sambhava Pava narrates the birth of various kings and heroes, and that of the sage, Krishna Dwapayana, the partial incarnations of deities, the generation of Danavas and Yakshas of great prowess, and serpents, Gandhavas, birds, and of all creatures, and lastly, of the life and adventures of King Bharata, the progenitor of the line that goes by his name, the son born of Sakantala in the hermitage of the ascetic Kanwa. This Pava also describes the greatness of Bhagriti, and the births of the Vasas in the house of Santanu and their ascension to heaven. In this Pava is also narrated the birth of Bhishma, uniting in himself portions of the energies of the other Vasas, his renunciation of royalty and adoption of the Brahmacharya mode of life, his adherence to his vows, his protection of Chitrangada, and after the death of Chitrangada, his protection of his younger brother, Vichitravirya, and his placing the latter on the throne, the birth of Dharma among men in consequence of the curse of Anumandavya, the births of Dhritarashtra and Pandu through the potency of Vyasa's blessings, and also the birth of the Pandavas, the plottings of Duryodhana to send the sons of Bandu to Vrinavata, and the other dark counsels of the sons of Dhritarashtra in regard to the Pandavas. Then the advice administered to Yudhishthira on his way by that well-wisher of the Pandavas, Vidura, in the Mlitsha language, the digging of the hole, the burning of Burachana and the sleeping woman of the fouler caste, with her 5 sons, in the house of Lak, the meeting of the Pandavas in the dreadful forest with Hidimba, and the slaying of her brother Hidimba by Bhima of great prowess, the birth of Ghatotkacha, the meeting of the Pandavas with Vyasa, and in accordance with his advice their stay in disguise in the house of a Brahmana in the city of Akachakra, the destruction of the Ajuravaka, and the amazement of the populace at the sight, the extraordinary births of Krishna and Drishadima, the departure of the Pandavas for Panchala in obedience to the injunction of Vyasa, and moved equally by the desire of winning the hand of Draupadi on learning the tidings of the Swayamvara from the lips of a Brahmana, victory of Arjuna over a Gandharva, called Angarapana, on the banks of the Bhagirathi, his contraction of friendship with his adversary, and his hearing from the Gandharva the history of Tapati, Vasishta and Ova. This Parva treats of the journey of the Pandavas towards Panchala, the acquisition of Draupadi in the midst of all the Rajas, by Arjuna, after having successfully pierced the mark, and in the ensuing fight, the defeat of Salya, Kama, and all the other crowned heads at the hands of Bhima and Arjuna of great prowess, the ascertainment by Balarama and Krishna, at the sight of these matchless exploits, that the heroes were the Pandavas, and the arrival of the brothers at the house of the potter where the Pandavas were staying, the dejection of Drupada on learning that Draupadi was to be wedded to 5 husbands, the wonderful story of the 5 Indras related in consequence, the extraordinary and divinely ordained wedding of Draupadi, the sending of Vidura by the sons of Dhritarashtra as envoy to the Pandavas, the arrival of Vidura and his sight to Krishna, the abode of the Pandavas in Kandavaprastha, and then the rule over 1/2 of the kingdom, the fixing of turns by the sons of Pandu, in obedience to the injunction of Narada, for connubial companionship with Krishna. In like manner hath the history of Sunda and Upasunda been recited in this. This Parva then treats of the departure of Arjuna for the forest according to the vow, he having seen Draupadi and Yudhishthira sitting together as he entered the chamber to take out arms for delivering the kine of a certain Brahmana. This Parva then describes Arjuna's meeting on the way with Alupai, the daughter of a Naga, serpent. It then relates his visits to several sacred spots, the birth of Vabruvahana, the deliverance by Arjuna of the 5 celestial damsels who had been turned into alligators by the imprecation of a Brahmana, the meeting of Madhava and Arjuna on the holy spot called Prabhasa, the carrying away of Subhadra by Arjuna, incited thereto by her brother Krishna, in the wonderful car moving on land and water, and through mid-air, according to the wish of the rider, the departure for Indraprastha, with a dower, the conception in the womb of Subhadra of that prodigy of prowess, Abhimanyu, Yajnasan is giving birth to children. Then follows the pleasure trip of Krishna and Arjuna to the banks of the Jamuna and the acquisition by them of the discus and the celebrated bow Gandhiva, the burning of the forest of Kandava, the rescue of Maya by Arjuna, and the escape of the serpent Kama and the begetting of a son by that best of rishis, Mandapala, in the womb of the bird Sanji. This Parva is divided by Vyasa into 227 chapters. These 227 chapters contain 8,884 slokas. The second is the extensive Parva called Sabha, the Assembly, full of matter. The subjects of this Parva are the establishment of the Grand Hall by the Pandavas, their review of their retainers, the description of the Lokapalas by Narada well acquainted with the celestial regions, the preparations for the Rajasuya sacrifice, the destruction of Jarasandha, the deliverance by Vasudeva of the princes confined in the mountain pass, the campaign of universal conquest by the Pandavas, the arrival of the princes at the Rajasuya sacrifice with tribute, the destruction of Sisupala on the occasion of the sacrifice, in connection with offering of Argaya, Bhimasana's ridicule of Duryodhana in the assembly, Duryodhana's sorrow and envy at the sight of the magnificent scale on which the arrangements had been made, the indignation of Duryodhana in consequence, and the preparations for the game of dice, the defeat of Yudhishthira at play by the wily Sakuni, the deliverance by Dhritarashtra of his afflicted daughter-in-law Draupadi plunged in the sea of distress caused by the gambling, as of a boat tossed about by the tempestuous waves. The endeavours of Duryodhana to engage Yudhishthira again in the game, and the exile of the defeated Yudhishthira with his brothers. These constitute what has been called by the great Vyasa the Sabha Parva. This Parva is divided into 8 sections, O best of Brahmanas, of 2,507 slokas. Then comes the third Parva called Aranyaka, relating to the forest. This Parva treats of the wending of the Pandavas to the forest and the citizens, following the wise Yudhishthira, Yudhishthira's adoration of the god of day, according to the injunctions of Dharma, to be gifted with the power of maintaining the dependent Brahmanas with food and drink, the creation of food through the grace of the sun, the expulsion by Dhritarashtra of Vidura, who always spoke for his master's good, Vidura's coming to the Pandavas and his return to Dhritarashtra at the solicitation of the latter, the wicked Duryodhana's plottings to destroy the forest-ranging Pandavas, being incited thereto by Kana, the appearance of Vyasa and his dissuasion of Duryodhana bent on going to the forest, the history of Zorabi, the arrival of Maitreya, his laying down to Dhritarashtra the course of action, and his curse on Duryodhana, Bhima's slaying of Kurmira in battle, the coming of the Panchalas and the princes of the Vrishan race to Yudhishthira on hearing of his defeat at the unfair gambling by Sakuni, Dhananjaya's allaying the wrath of Krishna, Draupadi's lamentations before Madhava, Krishna's cheering her, the fall of Saurva also has been here described by the Rishi, also Krishna's bringing Subhadra with her son to Dwaraka, and Drishthadama's bringing the son of Draupadi to Panchala, the entrance of the sons of Pandu into the romantic Dwaita wood, conversation of Bhima, Yudhishthira, and Draupadi, the coming of Vyasa to the Pandavas and his endowing Yudhishthira with the power of Pratismriti, then, after the departure of Vyasa, the removal of the Pandavas to the forest of Kamyaka, their wanderings of Arjuna of immeasurable prowess in search of weapons, his battle with Mahadeva in the guise of a hunter, his meeting with the Lokapalas and receipt of weapons from them, his journey to the regions of Indra for arms and the consequent anxiety of Dhritarashtra, the wailings and lamentations of Yudhishthira on the occasion of his meeting with the worshipful great sage Brihadaswa. Here occurs the holy and highly pathetic story of Nala, illustrating the patience of Damayanti and the character of Nala. Then the acquirement by Yudhishthira of the mysteries of dice from the same great sage. Then the arrival of the Rishi Lomasa from the heavens to where the Pandava were, and the receipt by these Hysule dwellers in the woods of the intelligence brought by the Rishi of their brother Arjuna staving in the heavens. Then the pilgrimage of the Pandavas to various sacred spots in accordance with the message of Arjuna, and their attainment of great merit and virtue consequent on such pilgrimage. Then the pilgrimage of the great sage Narada to the shrine Putasta, also the pilgrimage of the Hysule Pandavas. Here is the deprivation of the Kana of his earrings by Indra. Here also is recited the sacrificial magnificence of Gaya. Then the story of Agastya, in which the Rishi ate up the Ajuravatapi, and his connubial connection with Lopamudra from the desire of offspring. Then the story of Rishi Asaringa, who adopted Brahmacharya mode of life from his very boyhood. Then the history of Rama of great prowess, the son of Jamadani, in which has been narrated the death of Kartavirya and the Hayayas. Then the meeting between the Pandavas and the Vrishanis in the sacred spot called Prabhasa. Then the story of Sukanya, in which Kayavana, the son of Bhrigu, made the twins, Aswinis, drink, at the sacrifice of King Saryati, the Soma juice, from which they had been excluded by the other gods. and in which besides is shown how Kayavana himself acquired perpetual youth, as a boon from the great Vilaswinis. Then hath been described the history of King Mandata, then the history of Prince Jantu, and how King Somaka by offering up his only son, Jantu, in sacrifice obtained 100 others, then the excellent history of the hawk and the pigeon, then the examination of the king Sivi by Indra, Agni, and Dharma, then the story of Ashtavakra, in which occurs the disputation, at the sacrifice of Janaka, between the Trishi and the first of logicians, Vandi, the son of Varuna, the defeat of Vandi by the great Ashtavakra, and the release by the Rishi of his father from the depths of the ocean. Then the story of the Avkrita, and then that of the great Travya, then the departure of the Pandavas for Gandhamadana and their abode in the asylum called Narayana. Then Bhimasena's journey to Gandhamadana at the request of Draupadi, in search of the sweet-scented flower. Bhima's meeting on his way, in a grove of bananas, with Hanuman, the son of Pavana of great prowess, Bhima's bath in the tank and the destruction of the flowers therein for obtaining the sweet-scented flower he was in search of, his consequent battle with the mighty Rakshasas and the Yakshas of great prowess including Hanuman, the destruction of the Asurajata by Bhima, the meeting of the Pandavas with the royal sage Vrishapava, their departure for the asylum of Ashtishna and abode therein, the incitement of Bhima to acts of vengeance by Draupadi. Then is narrated the ascent on the hills of Kailasa by Bhimasena, his terrific battle with the mighty Yakshas headed by Hanuman, then the meeting of the Pandavas with Vaisravana, Kuvara, and the meeting with Arjuna after he had obtained for the purpose of Yudhishthira many celestial weapons, then Arjuna's terrible encounter with the Nivatakavishas dwelling in Hiranyapava, and also with the Polamas and the Klakas, their destruction at the hands of Arjuna, the commencement of the display of the celestial weapons by Arjuna before Yudhishthira, the prevention of the same by Narada, the descent of the Pandavas from Gandhamadana, the seizure of Bhima in the forest by a mighty serpent huge as the mountain, his release from the coils of the snake, upon Yudhishthira's answering certain questions, the return of the Pandavas to the Kamyaka woods. Here is described the reappearance of Vasudeva to see the mighty sons of Pandu, the arrival of Markandeya, and various recitals, the history of Prithu the son of Vena recited by the great Rishi, the stories of Saraswati and the Rishi Takaya. After these is the story of Matsya, other old stories recited by Markandeya, the stories of Indradyumna and Dundhumara, then the history of the chaste wife, the history of Angira, the meeting and conversation of Draupadi and Satyabhama, the return of the Pandavas to the forest of Dwaita, then the procession to see the calves and the captivity of Duryodhana, and when the wretch was being carried off, his rescue by Arjuna. Here is Yudhishthira's dream of the deer, then the re-entry of the Pandavas into the Kamyaka forest. Here also is the long story of Radronika. Here also is recited the story of Davasa, then the abduction by Jayadratha of Draupadi from the asylum, the pursuit of the Ravisha by Bhima swift as the air, and the ill-shaving of Jayadratha's crown at Bhima's hand. Here is the long history of Rama in which is shown how Rama by his prowess slew Ravana in battle. Here also is narrated the story of Savitri, then Karna's deprivation by Indra of his earrings, then the presentation to Karna by the gratified Indra of a Sakti, missile weapon, which had the virtue of killing only one person against whom it might be hurled, then the story called Ranya in which Dharma, the god of justice, gave advice to his son, Yudhishthira, in which, besides, is recited how the Pandavas after having obtained a boon went towards the west. These are all included in the third parva called Ranyaka, consisting of 269 sections. The number of slokas is 11,664. The extensive parva that comes next is called Virata. The Pandavas arriving at the dominions of Virata saw in a cemetery on the outskirts of the city a large shami tree whereon they kept their weapons. Here hath been recited their entry into the city and their stay there in disguise. Then the slaying by Bhima of the wicked Kikaka who, senseless with lust, had sought Draupadi, the appointment by Prince Duryodhana of clever spies, and the dispatch to all sides for tracing the Pandavas, the failure of these to discover the mighty sons of Pandu, the first seizure of Virata's kind by the Trigartas and the terrific battle that ensued, the capture of Viratu by the enemy and his rescue by Bhimasena, the release also of the kind by the Pandava, Bhima, the seizure of Virata's kind again by the Kuras, the defeat in battle of all the Kuras by the single-handed Arjuna, the release of the king's kind, the bestowal by Viratu of his daughter Udara for Arjuna's acceptance on behalf of his son by Subhadra, Abhimanyu, the destroyer of foes. These are the contents of the extensive fourth Parva, the Virata. The great Rishi Vyasa has composed in these 67 sections. The number of slokas is 2050. Listen then to the contents of the fifth Parva, which must be known as Udyoga. While the Pandavas, desirous of victory, were residing in the place called Paplavya, Duryodhana and Arjuna both went at the same time to Vasudeva, and said, "You should render us assistance in this war." The high-souled Krishna, upon these words being uttered, replied, "O ye first of men, a counsellor in myself who will not fight and one Akshowini of troops, which of these shall I give to which of you?" Blind to his own interests, the foolish Duryodhana asked for the troops, while Arjuna solicited Krishna as an unfighting counsellor. Then is described how, when the king of Madra was coming for the assistance of the Pandavas, Duryodhana, having deceived him on the way by presents and hospitality, induced him to grant a boon and then solicited his assistance in battle. Kausalya, having passed his word to Duryodhana, went to the Pandavas and consoled them by reciting the history of Indra's victory over Vritara. Then comes the dispatch by the Pandavas of their Purohita, priest, to the Kauravas. Then is described how King Dhritarashtra of great prowess, having heard the word of the Purohita of the Pandavas and the story of Indra's victory, decided upon sending his Purohita and ultimately dispatched Sanjaya as envoy to the Pandavas from desire for peace. Here hath been described the sleeplessness of Dhritarashtra from anxiety upon hearing all about the Pandavas and their friends, Vasudeva and others. It was on this occasion that Vidura addressed to the wise king Dhritarashtra various counsels that were full of wisdom. It was here also that Sanat Sujata recited to the anxious and sorrowing monarch the excellent truths of spiritual philosophy. On the next morning Sanjaya spoke, in the court of the king, of the identity of Vasudeva and Arjuna. It was then that the illustrious Krishna, moved by kindness and a desire for peace, went himself to the Kaurava capital, Hastinapura, for bringing about peace. Then comes the rejection by Prince Duryodhana of the embassy of Krishna who had come to solicit peace for the benefit of both parties. Here hath been recited the story of Damodara, then the story of the high-souled Matulai's search for a husband for his daughter, then the history of the great sage Galava, then the story of the training and discipline of the son of Baidula, then the exhibition by Krishna, before the assembled Rajas, of his yoga powers upon learning the evil counsels of Duryodhana and Karna, then Krishna's taking Karna in his chariot and his tendering to him of advice, and Karna's rejection of the same from pride. Then the return of Krishna, the chastiser of enemies from Hastinapura to Apaplavya, and his narration to the Pandavas of all that had happened. It was then that those oppressors of foes, the Pandavas, having heard all and consulted properly with each other, made every preparation for war. Then comes the march from Hastinapura, for battle, of foot soldiers, horses, charioteers and elephants. then the tale of the troops by both parties. Then the dispatch by Prince Duryodhana of Aluka as envoy to the Pandavas on the day previous to the battle. Then the tale of charioteers of different classes. Then the story of Amba. These all have been described in the fifth Parva called Udyoga of the Bharata, abounding with incidents appertaining to war and peace. O.E. ascetics, the great Vyasa hath composed 186 sections in this Parva. The number of slokas also composed in this by the great Rishi is 6,698. Then is recited the Bhishma Parva replete with wonderful incidents. In this hath been narrated by Sanjaya the formation of the region known as Jambu. Here hath been described the great depression of Yudhishthira's army, and also a fierce fight for 10 successive days. In this the high-souled Vasudeva, by reasons based on the philosophy of final release, drove away Arjuna's compunctioning springing from the latter's regard for his kindred, whom he was on the eve of slaying. In this the magnanimous Krishna, attentive to the welfare of Yudhishthira, seeing the loss inflicted on the Pandava army, descended swiftly from his chariot himself and ran, with dauntless breast, his driving whip in hand, to effect the death of Bhishma. In this, Krishna also smote with piercing words Arjuna, the bearer of the Gandiva and the foremost in battle among all wielders of weapons. In this, the foremost of bowmen, Arjuna, placing Shikandin before him and piercing Bhishma with his sharpest arrows, felled him from his chariot. In this, Bhishma lay stretched on his bed of arrows. This extensive Parva is known as the sixth in the Bharata. In this have been composed 117 sections. The number of slokas is 5,884 as told by Vyasa conversant with the Vedas. Then is recited the wonderful Parva called Drona, full of incidents. First comes the installation in the command of the army of the great instructor in arms, Drona. Then the vow made by that great master of weapons of seizing the wise Yudhishthira in battle to please Duryodhana. Then the retreat of Arjuna from the field before the Sansaptakas. Then the overthrow of Bhagadatta like to a second Indra in the field, with the elephant Supratika, by Arjuna. Then the death of the hero Abhimanyu in his teens, alone and unsupported, at the hands of many Maharathas including Jayadratha. Then after the death of Abhimanyu, the destruction by Arjuna, in battle of 7 Akshayinis of troops and then of Jayadratha, then the entry, by Bhima of mighty arms and by that foremost of warriors in chariot, Satyaki, into the core of ranks impenetrable even to the gods, in search of Arjuna in obedience to the orders of Yudhishthira, and the destruction of the remnant of the Sansaptakas. In the Drona Parva is the death of Alambashaw, of Sarutayas, of Jalasundha, of Shamadatta, of Virata, of the great warrior in chariot Drupada, of Gatotkacha and others. In this Parva, as Wataman, excited beyond measure at the fall of his father in battle, discharged the terrible weapon Narayana. Then the glory of Rudra in connection with the burning of the 3 cities. Then the arrival of Vyasa and recital by him of the glory of Krishna and Arjuna. This is the great 7th Parva of the Bharata, in which all the heroic chiefs and princes mentioned were sent to their account. The number of sections in this is 170. The number of slokas as composed in the Drona Parva by Rishi Vyasa, the son of Parasara and the possessor of true knowledge after much meditation, is 8,909. Then comes the most wonderful Parva called Karna. In this is narrated the appointment of the wise king of Madra as Karna's charioteer. Then the history of the fall of the Asura Tripura. Then the application to each other by Karna and Salya of harsh words on their setting out for the field. Then the story of the swan and the crow recited in insulting allusion. Then the death of Pandya at the hands of the high Sudas Wataman. Then the death of Dandasana. Then that of Dada, Then Yudhishthira's imminent risk in single combat with Karna in the presence of all the warriors. Then the mutual wrath of Yudhishthira and Arjuna. Then Krishna's pacification of Arjuna. In this Parva, Bhima, in fulfillment of his vow, having ripped open Dusasana's breast in battle, drank the blood of his heart. Then Arjuna slew the great Karna in single combat. Readers of the Bharata call this the 8th Parva. The number of sections in this is 69 and the number of slokas is 4,962. Then hath been recited the wonderful Parva called Salya. After all the great warriors had been slain, the king of Madra became the leader of the Kaurava army. The encounters one after another of charioteers have been here described. Then comes the fall of the great Salya at the hands of Yudhishthira, the just. Here also is the death of Sakuni in battle at the hands of Sahadeva. Upon only a small remnant of the troops remaining alive after the immense slaughter, Duryodhana went to the lake and creating for himself room within its waters lay stretched there for some time. Then is narrated the receipt of this intelligence by Bhima from the fowlers. Then is narrated how, moved by the insulting speeches of the intelligent Yudhishthira, Duryodhana, ever unable to bear affronts, came out of the waters. Then comes the encounter with clubs between Duryodhana and Bhima. Then the arrival, at the time of such encounter, of Balarama. Then is described the sacredness of the Saraswati. Then the progress of the encounter with clubs. Then the fracture of Duryodhana's thighs in battle by Bhima with a terrific hurl of his mace. These all have been described in the wonderful 9th Parva. In this the number of sections is 59 and the number of slokas composed by the great Vyasa, the spreader of the fame of the Kauravas, is 3,220. Then shall I describe the Parva called Sauptika of frightful incidents. On the Pandavas having gone away, the mighty charioteers, Kritavarman, Kripa, and the son of Drona, came to the field of battle in the evening, and they saw King Duryodhana lying on the ground, his thighs broken, and himself covered with blood. Then the great charioteer, the son of Drona, of terrible wrath, vowed, without killing all the Panchalas including Drishtadama, and the Pandavas also with all their allies, I will not take off armor. Having spoken those words, the 3 warriors leaving Duryodhana's side entered the great forest just as the sun was setting. While sitting under a large banyan tree in the night, they saw an owl killing numerous crows one after another. At the sight of this, Aswatthama, his heart full of rage at the thought of his father's fate, resolved to slay the slumbering Panchalas. And wending to the gate of the camp, he saw there a Rakshasa of frightful visage, his head reaching to the very heavens, guarding the entrance. And seeing that Rakshasa obstructing all his weapons, the son of Drona speedily pacified by worship the 3-eyed Rudra. And then accompanied by Kritavarman and Kripa he slew all the sons of Draupadi, all the Panchalas with Drishtadama and others, together with their relatives, slumbering unsuspectingly in the night. All perished on that fatal night except the 5 Pandavas and the great warrior Satyaki. Those escaped owing to Krishna's counsels. Then the charioteer of Drishtadama brought to the Pandavas intelligence of the slaughter of the slumbering Panchalas by the son of Drona. Then Draupadi, distressed at the death of her sons and brothers and further sat before her lords, resolved to kill herself by fasting. Then Bhima of terrible prowess, moved by the words of Draupadi, resolved to please her, and speedily taking up his mace followed in wrath the son of his preceptor in arms. The son of Drona, from fear of Bhimasena and impelled by the fates and moved also by anger, discharged a celestial weapon saying, "This is for the destruction of all the Pandavas." Then Krishna saying, "This shall not be," neutralized Aswatthama's speech. Then Arjuna neutralized that weapon by one of his own. Seeing the wicked as Wataman's destructive intentions, Vaipayana and Krishna pronounced curses on him, which the latter returned. Pandava then deprived the mighty warrior in chariot as Wataman of the jewel on his head, and became exceedingly glad, and, boastful of their success, made a present of it to the sorrowing Draupadi. Thus the 10th Parva, called Sauptika, is recited. The great Vyasa hath composed this in 18 sections. The number of slokas also composed, in this, by the great reciter of sacred truths is 870. In this Parva has been put together by the great Rishi the 2 Parvas called Sauptika and Aishika. After this hath been recited the highly pathetic Parva called Sri Dhritarashtra of prophetic eye, afflicted at the death of his children, and moved by enmity towards Bhima, broke into pieces a statue of hard iron deftly placed before him by Krishna, as substitute of Bhima. Then Vidura, removing the distressed Dhritarashtra's affection for worldly things by reasons pointing to final release, consoled that wise monarch. Then hath been described the wending of the distressed Dhritarashtra accompanied by the ladies of his house to the field of battle of the Kauravas. Here follow the pathetic wailings of the wives of the slain heroes. Then the wrath of Gandhari and Dhritarashtra and their loss of consciousness. Then the Kshatriya ladies saw those heroes, their unreturning sons, brothers, and furthers, lying dead on the field. Then the pacification by Krishna of the wrath of Gandhari distressed at the death of her sons and grandsons. Then the cremation of the bodies of the deceased Rajas with due rites by that monarch, Yudhishthira, of great wisdom and the foremost also of all virtuous men. Then upon the presentation of water of the manes of the deceased princes having commenced, the story of Kunti's acknowledgement of Kana as her son born in secret. Those have all been described by the great Rishi Vyasa in the highly pathetic 11th Parva. Its perusal moveth every feeling heart with sorrow and even draweth tears from the eyes. The number of sections composed is 27. The number of slokas is 775. 12th in number cometh the Santi Parva, which increaseth the understanding, and in which is related the despondency of Yudhishthira on his having slain his fathers, brothers, sons, maternal uncles and matrimonial relations. In this Parva is described how from his bed of arrows Bhishma expounded various systems of duties with the study of kings desirous of knowledge. This Parva expounded the duties relative to emergencies, with full indications of time and reasons. By understanding these, a person attaineth to consummate knowledge. The mysteries also of final emancipation have been expatiated upon. This is the 12th Parva, the favourite of the wise. It consists of 339 sections, and contains 14,732 slokas. Next in order is the excellent Tanusasana Parva. In it is described how Yudhishthira, the king of the Kuras, was reconciled to himself on hearing the exposition of duties by Bhishma, the son of Bhagrati. This Parva treats of rules in detail and of Dharma and Artha, then the rules of charity and its merits, then the qualifications of donis, and the supreme right regarding gifts. This Parva also describes the ceremonials of individual duty, the rules of conduct and the matchless merit of truth. This Parva showeth the great merit of Brahmanas and kine, and unravelleth the mysteries of duties in relation to time and place. These are embodied in the excellent Parva called Anusasana of varied incidents. In this hath been described the ascension of Bhishma to heaven. This is the 13th Parva, which hath laid down accurately the various duties of men. The number of sections in this is 146. The number of slokas is 8,000. Then comes the 14th Parva as Vaimtika. In this is the excellent story of Samvata and Maruta. Then is described the discovery, by the Pandavas, of golden treasuries, and then the birth of Parikshit, who was revived by Krishna after having been burnt by the celestial weapon of Aswatthama. The battles of Arjuna, the son of Pandu, while following the sacrificial horse let loose, with various princes who in wrath seized it. Then is shown the great risk of Arjuna in his encounter with Vabruvahana, the son of Chitrangada, by Arjuna, the appointed daughter of the chief of Manipura. Then the story of the monks during the performance of the horse sacrifice. This is the most wonderful bhava called as Vaindika. The number of sections is 103. The number of slokas composed in this by Vyasa of true knowledge is 3,320. Then comes the 15th bhava called as Ramvisika. In this, Dhritarashtra, abdicating the kingdom, and accompanied by Gandhari and Vijaya, went to the woods. Seeing this, the virtuous Prithu also, ever engaged in cherishing her superiors, leaving the court of her sons, followed the old couple. In this is described the wonderful meeting through the kindness of Vyasa of the king, Dhritarashtra, with the spirits of his slain children, grandchildren, and other princes, returned from the other world. Then the monarch, abandoning his sorrows, acquired with his wife the highest fruit of his meritorious actions. In this bhava, Vidura, after having leaned on virtue all his life, attaineth to the most meritorious state. The learned son of Gavalgana, Sanjaya, also of passions under full control, and the foremost of ministers, attained, in the bhava, to the blessed state. In this, Yudhishthira that just met Narada and heard from him about the extinction of the race of Vrishnis. This is the very wonderful bhava called as Ramvisika. The number of sections in this is 42, and the number of slokas composed by Vyasa cognizant of truth is 1,506. After this, comes the Maushala of painful incidents. In this, those lion-hearted heroes of the race of Vrishni, with the scars of many a field on their bodies, oppressed with the curse of a Brahmana, while deprived of reason from drink, impelled by the fates, slew each other on the shores of the salt sea with the areca grass which, in their hands, became invested with the fatal attributes of the thunder. In this, both Balarama and Krishna, after causing the extermination of their race, their hour having come, themselves did not rise superior to the sway of all-destroying time. In this, Arjuna, the foremost among men, going to Dwaraka, and seeing the city destitute of the Vrishnis, was much affected and became exceedingly sorry. Then after the funeral of his maternal uncle Vasudeva, the foremost among the Yadus, Vrishnis, he saw the heroes of the Yadu race lying stretched in death on the spot where they had been drinking. He then caused the cremation of the bodies of the illustrious Krishna and Balarama and of the principal members of the Vrishni race. Then, as he was journeying from Dwaraka with the women and children, the old and the decrepit, the remnants of the Yadu race, he was met on the way by a heavy calamity. He witnessed also the disgrace of his bow Gandhiva and the unpropitiousness of his celestial weapons. Seeing all this, Arjuna became despondent and, pursuant to Vyasa's advice, went to Yudhishthira and solicited permission to adopt the sannyasa mode of life. This is the 16th bhava called Maushala. The number of sections is 8, and the number of slokas composed by Vyasa cognizant of truth is 320. The next is Mahaprasthanika, the 17th bhava. In this, those foremost among men, the Pandavas abdicating their kingdom, went with Draupadi on their great journey called Mahaprasthana. In this, they came across Agni, having arrived on the shore of the Sea of Red Waters. In this, asked by Agni himself, Arjuna worshipped him duly, returned to him the excellent celestial bow called Gandhiva. In this, leaving his brothers who dropped one after another and Draupadi also, Yudhishthira went on his journey without once looking back on them. This the 17th bhava is called Mahaprasthanika. The number of sections in this is 3. The number of slokas also composed by Vyasa cognizant of truth is 320. The parva that comes after this, you must know, is the extraordinary one called Svaga of celestial incidents. Then seeing the celestial car come to take him, Yudhishthira moved by kindness towards the dog that accompanied him, refused to ascend it without his companion. Observing the illustrious Yudhishthira's steady adherence to virtue, Dharma, the god of justice, abandoning his canine form showed himself to the king. Then Yudhishthira, ascending to heaven, felt much pain. The celestial messenger showed him hell by an act of deception. Then Yudhishthira, the soul of justice, heard the heart-rending lamentations of his brothers abiding in that region under the discipline of Yama. Then Dharma and Indra showed Yudhishthira the region appointed for sinners. Then Yudhishthira, after leaving the human body by a plunge in the celestial Ganges, attained to that region which his acts merited, and began to live in joy respected by Indra and all other gods. This is the 18th parva as narrated by the illustrious Vyasa. The number of slokas composed, O ascetics, by the great Rishi in this is 209. The above are the contents of the 18 parvas. In the appendix, Kita, are the Harivansa and the Vaivishaya. The number of slokas contained in the Harivansa is 12,000. These are the contents of the section called Bhava Sangraha. Soti continued, 18 Akshayinis of troops came together for battle. The encounter that ensued was terrible and lasted for 18 days. He who knows the 4 Vedas with all the Angas and Upanishads, but does not know this history, Bharata, cannot be regarded as wise. Vyasa, of immeasurable intelligence, has spoken of the Mahabharata as a treatise on Artha, on Dharma, and on Karma. Those who have listened to his history can never bear to listen to others, as, indeed, they who have listened to the sweet voice of the male kokla can never hear the dissonance of the crow's cawing. As the formation of the 3 worlds proceedeth from the 5 elements, so do the inspirations of all poets proceed from this excellent composition. O ye Brahman, as the 4 kinds of creatures, viviparous, oviparous, born of hot moisture and vegetables, are dependent on space for their existence, so the Puranas depend upon this history. As all the senses depend for their exercise upon the various modifications of the mind, so do all acts, ceremonials, and moral qualities depend upon this treatise. There is not a story current in the world that doth depend on this history, even as body upon the food it taketh. All poets cherish the Bharata even as servants desirous of preferment always attend upon masters of good lineage. Even as the blessed domestic Asrama can never be surpassed by the 3 other Asramas, modes of life, so no poets can surpass this poem. Ye ascetics, shake off all inaction. Let your hearts be fixed on virtue, for virtue is the one only friend of him that has gone to the other world. Even the most intelligent by cherishing wealth and wives can never make these their own, nor are these possessions lasting. The Bharata uttered by the lips of Advaitayana is without a parallel. It is virtue itself and sacred. It destroyeth sin and produceth good. He that listeneth to it while it is being recited hath no need of a bath in the sacred waters of Pushkara. A Brahmana, whatever sins he may commit during the day through his senses, is freed from them all by reading the Bharata in the evening. Whatever sins he may commit also in the night by deeds, words, or mind, he is freed from them all by reading Bharata in the first twilight, morning. He that giveth 100 kine with horns mounted with gold to a Brahmana well posted up in the Vedas and all branches of learning, and he that daily listeneth to the sacred narrations of the Bharata, acquireth equal merit. As the wide ocean is easily passable by men having ships, so is this extensive history of great excellence and deep import with the help of this chapter called Bhava Sangraha. Thus endeth the section called Parva Sangraha of the Adi Parva of the blessed Mahabharata. Section 3. Porshaya Parva. Soti said, Janamejaya, the son of Parikshit, was, with his brothers, attending his long sacrifice on the plains of Kurukshetra. His brothers were three, Srutasena, Ugrasena, and Bhimasena. And as they were sitting at the sacrifice, there arrived at the spot an offspring of Sarima, the celestial bitch. And belaboured by the brothers of Janamejaya, he ran away to his mother, crying in pain. And his mother, seeing him crying exceedingly, asked him, Why criest thou so? Who hath beaten thee? And being thus questioned, he said unto his mother, I have been belaboured by the brothers of Janamejaya. And his mother replied, Thou hast committed some fault, for which hast thou been beaten? He answered, I have not committed any fault. I have not touched the sacrificial butter with my tongue, nor have I even cast a look upon it. His mother Saroma, hearing this, and much distressed at the affliction of her son, went to the place where Janamejaya with his brothers was at his long extending sacrifice. And she addressed Janamejaya in anger, saying, This my son hath committed no fault, he hath not looked upon your sacrificial butter, nor hath he touched it with his tongue. Wherefore hath he been beaten? They said not a word in reply, whereupon she said, As ye have beaten my son who hath committed no fault, therefore shall evil come upon ye, when ye least expect it. Janamejaya, thus addressed by the celestial bitch, Sarima, became exceedingly alarmed and dejected. And after the sacrifice was concluded, returned to Hastinapura, and began to take great pains in searching for a Purohita who could, by procuring absolution for his sin, neutralize the effect of the curse. One day Janamejaya, the son of Parikshit, while a hunting, observed in a particular part of his dominions hermitage where dwelt a certain rishi of fame, Srutasrava. He had a son named Somasrava, deeply engaged in ascetic devotions. Being desirous of appointing that son of the rishi as his Purohita, Janamejaya, the son of Parikshit, saluted the rishi and addressed him, saying, O possessor of the 6 attributes, let this thy son be my Purohita. The rishi, thus addressed, answered Janamejaya, O Janamejaya, this my son, deep in ascetic devotions, accomplished in the study of the Vedas, and endued with the full force of my asceticism, is born of the womb of a she-snake that had drunk my vital fluid. He is able to absolve thee from all offences save those committed against Mahadeva. But he hath one particular habit, viz. He would grant to any Brahmana whatever might be begged of him. If thou canst put up with it, then thou take him. Janamejaya, thus addressed, replied to the rishi, It shall be even so. And accepting him for his Purohita, he returned to his capital, and he then addressed his brothers, saying, This is the person I have chosen for my spiritual master. Whatsoever he may say must be complied with by you without examination. And his brothers did as they were directed. And giving these directions to his brothers, the king marched towards Takshashila and brought that country under his authority. About this time there was a rishi, Aodadamya by name. And Aodadamya had 3 disciples, Upamanyu, Aruni, and Veda. And the rishi bade one of these disciples, Aruni of Panchala, to go and stop up a breach in the watercourse of a certain field. And Aruni of Panchala, thus ordered by his preceptor, repaired to the spot. And having gone there, he saw that he could not stop up the breach in the watercourse by ordinary means, and he was distressed because he could not do his preceptor's bidding. But at length he saw a way and said, Well, I will do it in this way. He then went down into the breach and lay down himself thee, and the water was thus confined. And some time after, the preceptor Aodadamya asked his other disciples where Aruni of Panchala was. And they answered, Sir, he hath been sent by yourself, saying, Go, stop up the breach in the watercourse of the field. Thus reminded, Damya, addressing his pupils, said, "Then let us all go to the place where he is." And having arrived there, he shouted, "Ho, Aruni of Panchala! Where art thou? Come hither, my child." And Aruni, hearing the voice of his preceptor, speedily came